a gentle father, a church volunteer, a man who helped install home security systems. And yet behind the smile lay unspeakable evil. He called himself BTK, bind, torture, kill. His name was Dennis Rader. For decades, he prowled Wichita, Kansas, while no one suspected the monster among them. Dennis Lynn Rader was born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas. He grew up in a quiet household, the oldest of 4 sons. Outwardly normal, inside haunted. He said in later interviews that as a child he felt angry, powerless. He tortured small animals, cats, small mammals. Behavior experts later noted this was often an early sign among violent criminals. Rader was also raised deeply religious, attending church regularly. He became involved in community organizations such as the Boy Scouts. He married Paula Dietz in 1971, and they had 2 children. No one saw a monster. He wore the mask of respectability, community service, obedience to rules. It was perfect camouflage. On January 15, 1974, the BTK killer struck for the first time, or at least the first time the world would later definitively link to him. The Otero family, Joseph and Julia Otero, and 2 of their children, ages 9 and 11, were all found dead in their home in Wichita. Bound, strangled, no immediate suspect. The community was stunned. Rader did not remain silent. In October 1974, just months after the murders, a letter was found in a library book. It was signed BTK, an ominous acronym, bind, torture, kill. He described the murders with details only the killer could know. He demanded acknowledgement. He basked in attention. After the Otero murders, Rader's killings didn't stop. In April 1974, he attacked Catherine Bright. Soon, Shirley Vian, Nancy Fox, other victims followed. Each time, his signature methods, binding, strangling, sometimes stabbing, remained. But with them came periods of silence. Years without a murder, years with public pressure, but no capture. These cooling-off periods puzzled investigators. Rader seemed to vanish. Sometimes he would return, sending letters to newspapers, media, or directly to police. He wanted to be known. He thrived on the fear, on the uncertainty. No one could predict when he would strike next. For decades, BTK continued his cat-and-mouse game. 10 murders confirmed. Many believe more. But despite his letters, his threats, his chilling communications, no arrest. It would take a mistake, just one misstep, to bring the killer who hid in plain sight to justice. Next, understanding how his double life, his arrogance, and technology led to his capture. By the late 1970s, Wichita was on edge. The Otero murders had shocked the community, and Catherine Bright's death had confirmed one thing. BTK wasn't a one-time killer. He was evolving, learning, and growing bolder. What terrified the city most was simple. He could be anyone. On March 17, 1977, BTK struck again. His victim, 24-year-old Shirley Vian. That day, Shirley's young children were at home when a man forced his way in. Rader tied the children in a bathroom to keep them out of the way. Then he turned his attention to their mother. Shirley Vian was bound and strangled. Miraculously, her children survived, traumatized, but alive to tell investigators what little they could about the intruder. It was another example of his chilling duality. A man who worked for ADT security during the day, helping families feel safe, but at night, prowl neighborhoods, deciding who would die. That same year, December 8, 1977, BTK claimed another life. 25-year-old Nancy Fox. Unlike some earlier murders, this time, Dennis Rader called police himself. In a chilling calm, he reported the crime, saying, "You will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing." When investigators arrived, they found Nancy strangled, bound, and her telephone line cut. It was BTK announcing his presence. By now, BTK's communication was as infamous as his crimes. In 1978, he sent a letter to a local TV station claiming responsibility for multiple murders. He mocked the police, taunted investigators, and signed once again as BTK. He even suggested names for himself, like the Wichita Strangler. But it was a chosen acronym: bind, torture, kill, that stuck. Chilling. Direct. He relished it. By the end of the 1970s, Wichita was living in fear. Residents double-locked their doors, checked their windows, and avoided being alone at night. Sales of firearms and security systems surged. Ironically, Dennis Rader was working for ADT Security during these years, visiting homes, installing alarms, and giving advice on how to stay safe, all while plotting his next kill. Then silence. After 1979, BTK seemed to disappear. Months turned into years. Some wondered if he had died, been arrested for something else, or simply stopped. Others feared he was only waiting, watching. The pause only deepened the city's anxiety. Because when BTK was quiet, it didn't mean he was gone. The city waited. The police hunted shadows. And BTK vanished from headlines. But he hadn't disappeared. He was still there, living his double life as a family man, a church leader, a neighbor. And when he returned, his mistakes would eventually expose him. But first, he would remind Wichita that he was still out there. After 1979, Wichita experienced something it hadn't in years: silence. BTK seemed to vanish. Detectives had folders stacked high with evidence, witness interviews, and crime scene photos, but no suspect. As years passed, the fear began to fade, but it never fully disappeared. The whispers remained. Was BTK still out there? Or had he simply moved on? For Dennis Rader, the pause was calculated. He was blending into the background. He focused on his family, raising 2 children, holding down a job with ADT, and climbing into leadership positions at his local church. Outwardly, he was a devoted father and community member. Inwardly, he still harbored his dark fantasies. Dennis Rader was more than just a husband and father. He became president of his church council, a Cub Scout leader, and even worked as a compliance officer for the city of Park City. Neighbors saw him as strict but responsible. The irony was chilling. BTK was walking among them, organizing church events, enforcing local codes, even ticketing people for minor infractions. The predator had disguised himself as an enforcer of order. For years, it seemed like Rader had stopped killing. But in April 1985, he resurfaced. His victim was 53-year-old Maureen Hedge, a neighbor living just a few doors down from the Rader family. On the night of April 27th, Dennis attended a church meeting with his family before slipping away. He cut Hedge's phone line, entered her home, and strangled her. In a disturbing twist, he transported her body to his church basement, photographing her in bondage before discarding her in a ditch. It was perhaps the clearest glimpse yet into the split identities of Dennis Rader. Church leader on one hand, sadistic killer on the other. After Hedge's murder, Rader went silent again. The city of Wichita was oblivious. There was no media storm, no clear connection between crimes. The trail grew colder. For Rader, the silence was part of the thrill. He could kill when he wanted. He could stop when he wanted. The game was entirely under his control. In January 1991, Rader killed again. His victim was Dolores Davis, a 62-year-old woman who lived alone. He broke into her home, strangled her, and disposed of her body under a bridge. As with his previous killings, he meticulously planned every detail, ensuring police would have no clear trail to follow. Davis would be his last known victim. After Davis, Rader vanished again. The murder stopped. For over a decade, it appeared that BTK was gone for good. From 1991 to 2004, BTK was silent. Investigators believed the case had gone cold forever. Some even speculated he had died. The Wichita community moved on. New generations grew up never knowing the terror their parents once lived through. But BTK wasn't gone. He was simply waiting until his own arrogance brought him back into the light. Then, in March 2004, after more than a decade of silence, BTK re-emerged. A local newspaper published a story reflecting on the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders. For Dennis Rader, it was too much to resist. He needed credit. He needed attention. Days later, a letter arrived at the Wichita Eagle. Inside was a copy of a victim's driver's license and photographs only the killer could possess. BTK was back. Over the next year, Rader played his game again. He mailed packages, left messages in public places, and even placed a cereal box with BTK materials in the back of a pickup truck at Home Depot. He couldn't resist toying with police. But this time, his need for control would lead to his downfall. For 3 decades, BTK had evaded justice. But his own ego would finally betray him. He believed he was smarter than investigators, untouchable after all these years. But one simple mistake, a question about technology, would unravel everything. And the hunter would finally be caught. For decades, Dennis Rader had outsmarted investigators. He believed he was untouchable. But in 2004, as his communications with police escalated, he asked a question that would cost him everything. Can a floppy disk be traced back to me? Police told him no. He believed them. And so, BTK mailed a purple floppy disk to a local TV station. It was the beginning of the end. Forensic experts analyzed the disk. Hidden in its metadata was a clue. The last document had been saved at Christ Lutheran Church. Even more damning, the username attached was Dennis. Detectives immediately connected the dots. Dennis Rader, church council president, city compliance officer, husband, and father, was suddenly their prime suspect. Police launched surveillance on Rader. They followed him, gathered evidence, and searched for a DNA match. Eventually, investigators obtained a sample from his daughter's pap smear, stored at a medical facility. The results were conclusive. The DNA linked directly to BTK crime scenes. The mask had finally slipped. After 30 years of cat and mouse, they had their man. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was pulled over while driving near his home. Wichita police swarmed his vehicle, finally arresting the man who had terrorized the city for 3 decades. The quiet compliance officer, the church leader, was unmasked as BTK. In a chilling courtroom confession, Rader described in detail how he stalked, bound, tortured, and killed his victims. His tone was calm, almost clinical, as if he were discussing routine tasks rather than brutal murders. For many, it was the most haunting aspect of his entire story, the banality of evil spoken in Rader's own words. In August 2005, Dennis Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, 1 for each known victim. The judge called his crimes inhumane and monstrous. Rader showed little emotion, except when speaking about himself. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, a predator finally caged. The BTK case left scars on Wichita. Families of victims carried pain for decades. Residents who lived through the terror still remember locking their doors at night, jumping at every shadow. The case also transformed how law enforcement investigates serial killers, emphasizing DNA evidence, digital forensics, and psychological profiling. Perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all was how ordinary Dennis Rader appeared. A husband, a father, a church leader, a neighbor. BTK wasn't a monster hiding in the shadows. He was hiding in plain sight. And that, more than anything, is what still haunts Wichita. The reminder that evil can wear a mask of normalcy. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, sits behind bars today. His story is a chilling lesson about control, obsession, and the fragile line between the ordinary and the unthinkable. What do you think drives someone like Rader? Is it power or something deeper? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this documentary insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest true crime stories.